take a moment and go over not necessarily the selection tools, that's going to be your job in a few minutes, but instead just talk about what selections are and why we care about them and why they are so important. So selections are ways that you can isolate parts of your layers, whereas layers you can isolate parts of, your entire composition. With a selection, I can select, let's say, like I want just his shirt to be in color still. This is just one use case. I could select his shirt and then create a hue saturation layer, and I could desaturate everything except what was inside of my selection. That sort of selection would be called a freeform selection. I can also make selections that are shapes, whether it's a circle or an ellipse or an oval or a rectangle. And then I can also, there's tools that allow Photopea or Photoshop to figure out what exactly your subject is and what you might want to be selecting, which, sometimes work better than other times. But a selection is represented, I'll just use the basic one here, the rectangular marquee tool. In Photopea, it's called the rectangle select. If I click and hold on that tool in the toolbox, you can see rectangle select and ellipse select. So with the rectangle select, I can just click and drag on a portion of my image. And in Photoshop, you're going to see this dotted line, this dashed line moving. In Photopea, it doesn't. We call them marching ants in Photoshop. They're not really marching here, though. But this dashed line represents what is called a selection. So the beauty of a selection is that, like I said, it isolates part of your image. So if I was to, I'm going to create a new layer here, and you'll see that because selections are actually independent of layers, I can use a selection on multiple layers if I want to. I can create new layers or delete layers, and the selection remains there because it's kind of floating outside of everything. It's in its own dimension. But on this new layer, because I have this square selection on here, if I was to take my brush, for example, and I'm going to make it larger, just because, yeah, that works, and I start to color, you can see that no matter how far outside of my selection I get, it only lets me edit inside of that selection. And you can see on my layer 1 that it's colored in on that one layer that I had selected over here. So again, a selection isolates a part of a layer for you. Um, And there are many selection tools. I'll show you just these first couple. They select the rectangle select and the ellipse select. So obviously with the rectangle select, I could also hold shift, drag, and I can create a square as well. That didn't really work. I'm going to go down here so you can see it a little bit easier. If I hold shift, it keeps it in proportion. Just like when you are transforming an image, you hold shift and it keeps your image in proportion. It does the same thing with a selection tool. So I can create a square like that, and then I have my square. There you go, so it's easier to see. Same thing with the ellipse or the ellipse select tool. I can create an ellipse if I want to, and sort of whatever dimensions I like, or again, if I hold shift, click and drag, I can create a circle. There are some modifier tools. You'll notice some different options in your options bar, but I'm not going to go over those yet. I just want you to know exactly kind of the basics for your rectangle and ellipse select. Your jobs are going to be to discover how these guys work. The next two tools in your toolbox are also sets of selection tools. So you have your lasso select, your polygonal lasso, your magnetic lasso, you have object selection, quick selection, and magic wand. All right, so you guys get to explore that.